all of you?
Yes, sir. All good.
Good time to start, ma'am?
Hanji, it's live, so please go ahead.
All right. A very warm morning to one and all. I welcome each and every one of you to yet another episode of the Yogananda Guru web series. It is September 10th today, a date that is observed as the World Suicide Prevention Day, and it brings with it an opportunity to address common and critical next-door issues concerned with mental health. The theme this year is creating hope through action, and truly all of us can play a role, no matter how big or small. And I believe that we may never really know what it is that we do that actually makes a difference in the lives of others. And I truly also believe that small talk can save lives, and it is powerful enough to create a sense of connection and hope in somebody who may be struggling. And that is why we're here today. Today's purpose of the Guru Talk is to reach unaddressed corners and conflicts that some of us may be facing. And the goal is to be the beacon of light to those in pain. I'm Shreya Mahajan, and I, along with fellow hosts Niharika and Man, we will be your moderators for the day. Once again, I welcome all of you. We have a riveting session in store for you today, and we hope that you greatly benefit from the talk with TEDx speaker, youth influencer, author, and mental health advocate, Yash Tiwari. Yash, we're really happy to have you here with us. And once again, welcome to the Yogananda Guru series today.
Thank you so much, Shreya. Trust me, I'm really very excited to be interacting with the brilliant students of Shulin University as well as all the other participants and audience members who might be watching us live right now. And as you mentioned, that you can have a huge impact on somebody's life by actions, by behaviors that even you consciously might not be aware of. There are things on regular basis that we do, the ways in which we behave, which we are not mindful about, which we are not giving a second thought to. But at the same time, believe it or not, they might be having a very profound impact on somebody else's life, on the, let's say, some other corner of the world even. So that is what we are going to take a look at in today's session. That is what we are going to talk about. The diverse avenues of mental health, which are hardly ever discussed, especially amongst the youngsters. And I genuinely hope that the conversation which we are going to have, it truly helps these youngsters, these people who are listening to us right now, especially in regards to their psychological well-being. So looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have, and very excited for it as well.
Well, the pleasure is ours. Yes, thank you so much. And I totally agree. I think as long as our intent is right, we're off to a great start. And so before we take a leap to your talk, I would now like to invite our Dean Student Welfare, Mrs. Poonam Nanda. She's here to address the viewers. And ma'am, I would request you to formally invite Yash to our Yogananda Guru series today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you for setting up the context, and welcome Yash and all of you who are here today for our prestigious Yogananda Guru series. We actually started Guru series with a vision to bring in the best gurus that we have in their fields. In fact, Yash, we have an enviable lineup of Sri Ravi Shankar, Yuvraj Singh, Kiran Bedi, Diya Mirza, Arun Shourie, Harbhajan Singh, late Milkha Singh ji, just to name a few. And in fact, during the COVID period, you'll be surprised that, while people were struggling with all kinds of things and getting onto the tech platforms, we started our e-Guru series. And that's how we are able to have people like you who may be sitting in another city. And we were having one talk almost every day. And now we recently started a new Young Achievers series. And so that's where you have a befitting place, certainly. So,
thank you so much.
Yes. So before I hand over the mic to Niharika and Yash, of course, let me tell you that Yash Tiwari is an international youth mentor. He has done 6 TED Talks. My God, I was pretty amazed. Yash, 6 is not a small number. And that
thank you so much.
It's wonderful. And he's a public speaker, a mental health awareness advocate, and he's the award-winning author of 2 books, a youth influencer. His debut novel, A Celebration in Tribulation, was written at the age of 16. And he's authored Pandemic 2020, Life of the Virus, the world's first fiction book to be written, and he's the youngest author to have written a fiction book on COVID, right, Yash, if I'm not wrong?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay. And as a public speaker and youth mentor, Yash is invited not across just our country, but all across the globe. So he's been speaking to, young people all across the world. His books have won several awards through various agencies. I just kind of lost count, but I'll tell you, he's top 100 inspiring authors, author of the year, youth leader award, top 100 influential people of India, and the best debut author. So thank you so much, Yash, for being so, gracious.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, you accepted my invitation so spontaneously, and I know the kind of work schedule you have. I've been following you since you did the TEDx talk for us, and I know you are extremely busy. But today, as Shreya said, it is World Suicide Prevention Day, and you talk so much about mental health. So I thought this would be a real befitting occasion to have you here. So thank you. And from now here, I invite Niharika to take over, and we proceed with the session. Welcome, everyone.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Poonam ma'am. And once again, a very warm welcome to Mr. Yash Tiwari. Mental health is a very pertinent issue nowadays. So we are fortunate to have you with us, an expert in this field, to help us understand more about this sensitive topic. Without further ado, if everyone's ready, let's get started. First things first, Yash, how significantly important do you think mental health is in a person's life?
All right. So I think this is a good note to begin our discussion with, because before going into the complexities of our psychological well-being, we first need to understand its actual importance. We first need to understand what it genuinely means, what we are talking about when we said that, we are supposed to work on our psychological well-being or our mental health, or however you would like to put it as. So when we are discussing about mental health, or when I talk about advocating the well-being of your psychological health, I'm particularly talking about your psychological, but also your emotional and your social well-being. We are basically, just to simplify these terminologies, talking not just about how your mind works, but we are also talking about how you think, how you behave, how you act, how you react, and also how you feel. So all the aspects of mind, of course, are a part of your mental health. But beyond that, all the physical aspects of who you are, all the social aspects of what you do, the way in which you respond, the way in which you react, all of that is also hugely impacted by your mental well-being. Now think about it this way. Even for you to, let's say, make coffee for yourself, or just walk to a friend of yours, you have to do a physical action, right? You have to physically perform the task. But your body will not be able to do that until and unless your mind sends a signal for it. So this gives us another definition for mental health as well, that we are not just talking about your psychological, your emotional, or your social well-being. We are also talking about your decision making. We are also talking about something as complex as your coping mechanisms in times of grief and loss, which many of us were quite frequently suffering from in the past 1 year because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And we are, I should say, literally talking about anything or everything that you do. Let me give another analogy to simplify all of this that I just, bantered in your way right now. If your limb is fractured, if your hand is fractured or your leg is fractured, of course, you cannot take even a single step ahead, right? Or you cannot even pick up the lightest of weight that there possibly can be. Or if there is a wound in your hand, of course, it will be painful. But when we are talking about our mind and it is being injured, it is being fractured, or it is being compromised in some or the other way, of course, it is not physically visualizable. It is not something that you can perceive with your naked eyes. But at the same time, trust me, just like any other physical injury or physical compromise to your body, it will also fracture the way in which you act, in which you react, in which you think, in which you respond, in which you make decisions. So all in all, the one thing that I want all our audience members to be absolutely clear about is that we are not just talking of your thinking processes or ideologies when we are talking of your mental health. We are talking about all your life activities, all your day-to-day chores as well at the same time.
Definitely. It's much huger than just what's in the mind, because after all, the mind is what affects
Exactly.
everything else. Definitely. Going on, it is being said that societies around the world have finally started discussing topics of psychological well being more openly. As a global mental health awareness advocate, do you agree with this view? If not, then why?
Well, Niharika, I have to say this is quite a subjective point of view if we talk about it, because on one hand, yes, I have to be bluntly honest. Discussions are happening, especially in the past 1 year, I would say, because of the COVID-19, because of the lockdown, however you would like to put it as. We did start discussing about the topics of psychological well-being and the mental health of the people around the world, not just here in India, but in various other countries as well, which are still developing, which are still growing. Youngsters in particular also started to acknowledge the distress or the anxieties or the depressions that they are facing, which might or might not be because of all the time that we had in our hand when we were locked up within the four walls of our houses. So yes, definitely, because of the past 1 year and all that it brought to us, we started to discuss about the topic of mental health. But at the same time, if you are also asking for my humble opinion about it, the effectiveness of it, then I would say that no matter how much we are doing right now, we are still not doing enough. That is the blunt reality which I want to talk about. And this is something which I'm seeing not just in the air, but I'm seeing this after mentoring and interacting with thousands upon thousands of youngsters who are suffering from such mental health concerns, especially in the past few years, even long before the COVID-19 outbreak. So I can absolutely tell you that no matter how much effort we are putting in right now, because of some or the other reason, it is still not enough. And the reason why I say so, the reason why I feel that the mental health discussions are still not enough, the ones that are happening, it is because of this one specific reason, which is basically about the fact that I see that the people in general are willing to communicate. They are even making an effort to communicate about the psychological well-being, the mental health, and all the correlated topics. But the curiosity about it, the keenness about it, the interest about it, that is still somewhat missing. That especially amongst the youngsters who are so much focused on the outwardly pretense. And I'm not talking about everyone, I'm talking about majority of them. Of course, there are many people who do genuinely want to contribute towards this topic, who do want to create a difference. But because majority of the people are still more focused on how they appear to be, they are very less focused on what is going on over here inside the mind. And because of that, the keenness, the interest, the curiosity towards the topic of mental health is also still missing. Like, as a matter of fact, not very long ago, I would say, a month or so ago, I came up with this project, this literary project, which is also my third novel at the age of 19 right now, titled Mental Health Tales and Conundrums. And I decided to create this project because I wanted to create a literary narrative on the topic of mental health and psychological well being. And I also wanted it to be as much charitable as possible towards the same cause too. So I rounded up, I would say, more than a dozen students whom I have mentored about the art of creative writing and storytelling in past. And I asked them to create narratives about this particular topic as well. And then eventually we all compiled the entirety of the narrative and we published a book. So that was just one part of the story, I would say. The reason why I went on to create this novel, which, by the way, 100% of the profits of which are going to go to the mental health institutions and mental health support organizations. But the reason why this project even materialized in the first place was because I was curious about amalgamating my passion for literature also with my passion for mental health and my curiosity towards how these can be combined and brought out in the world in the best possible manner to genuinely create a change. So this is what I hope for more from the youngsters, especially, to not just have talents or passions within you, but to channel it in the best possible direction as well when we talk about such important social topics like the mental health itself that we're talking about right now. And then another point of view which I want to be very clear about over here is that the iron bars which are obstructing the discussions of mental health right now, they are quite tall, they are quite high, and they are quite strong as well. They are quite impregnable as well. So it is not going to work out. Those shackles are not going to break down just with a handful of discussions about the psychological well-being of the people. It has to be consistent, it has to be persistent, and it has to be solid as well, driven with a sense of curiosity. So that is what I would like to say on this topic.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough if we say that we've taken a couple of steps in the right direction, but the journey is still really long, and we still aren't able to
Very long.
particularly view the destination very clearly, I think. It kind of brings us to our next question, which is a more what why kind of a question. It says, what
Sure.
according to you is the root cause of all the stigma that still surrounds open dialogues on the topic of mental health? Or in other words, why is the conversation on mental health still so stigmatized?
All right. There can be multiple reasons about it, and every single person would have a different opinion on this topic as well, based on their own personal experiences. But according to me, the one grassroots level reason, or should I say the root cause behind why the mental health discussions are still so much stigmatized, even though we have advanced so much, we have developed so much, we are still not talking enough about such topics. So people are not willing to talk about these topics, is particularly because of the fact, which I stated earlier, that your mental illnesses or your mental injuries, they are not physically perceivable. You cannot see that on the face of a person. Of course, you can make that out if you are very close with the person and you are seeing you are experiencing the changes in their behavior, in their mood patterns and stuff like that. But if a person is walking by you and he is internally suffering from depression or anxiety or tension or whatever it might be, can you possibly make that out simply by looking at that person? Unless you are Edward Cullen from Twilight. So, I mean, we have to be very honest about the fact that until and unless you cannot read the mind of another person sitting right in front of you, you will not be able to perceive the tension, the distress, I would say the raging storm that is coming up in their mind right now as they sit right in front of you and make ordinary conversations with you as well at the same time. So this is one reason which kind of acts as the root cause behind why the mental health discussions are still so much stigmatized. Why, you may ask? There is another logical reason behind it as well. When I say that these issues or these concerns, the psychological concerns, are not physically perceivable, let alone the people around you who will not be able to perceive, who will not be able to make out the issues that you are going ahead with. But even as a sufferer yourself, most of the time, I would say in majority of the cases, people feel that because their depression or anxiety is not physically perceivable, right? It is not physically visible on who they are or how they act. So why to even bother about it? Why to seek help for it or reach out to their parents or family members or friends about it if it is not even physically visible on them? Most of the people feel that just because this is something that is very internal, that might fade away with the course of time, which might fade away over a period of time, then why to even bother talking about it right now in the present tense? So because we are built up with such an, I would say, stereotypical societal ideology in the world of today, even though it is so much advanced, even though it is so much modernized, that you should focus more on how you appear to be. That internal aspect of all the storm, of all the rage, of all the things that are going up in your mind, they do not hold any value to you. And eventually, you feel that you need not to even talk about it. And if you do, it will not hold any value whatsoever. So the root cause, as we're talking about it, according to me, about why the mental health discussions are still so much stigmatized, comes from the fact that it is not physically perceivable on the people. So sufferers themselves feel like they need not to talk about it whatsoever because it is not going to make any change. So I think that is one of the root causes why it is still so much stigmatized.
That's actually, I kind of agree with that point. And yeah, and I hope the solution to that is talks like these. I hope people listening to conversations like these realize that they have to be more sensitive and maybe sometimes dig deeper and
Absolutely.
not just be perceiving on the surface level.
See,
Talking
Niharika,
about
I must tell you before we do move forward, as you mentioned over here, this was a very appropriate point. Discussions like these that Shulin University is hosting right now, it makes the youngsters, especially the youngsters, understand that their mental health does matter. It is a topic worth talking about. It is not a topic that, it is just trending on Instagram or Twitter. It is genuinely a discussion that needs to be taken into account, that needs to be looked after as well. It is a topic worth discussing about, worth talking about. So trust me, I'm really very happy that this event has been scheduled, especially on the day as today we have. And I'm also very happy that so many youngsters are listening to us right now as well, because it serves the purpose of starting a constructive conversation about something so important to the well-being of each and every person around the world.
Yeah, Niharika, just one point I want to ask Yash. Sorry for the interruption.
No, go ahead.
Okay, Yash, you talked about people themselves. Let's say I'm the one who's suffering, right? So you are talking about me not thinking of it as, something real or not worth talking about. But even if I pick up the courage to talk about it,
yes,
9 out of 10 people around me are not going to take me seriously and say, it's just a passing phase. ठीक हो जाएगा, don't worry about it too much. ये सिर्फ तुम्हारे दिमाग में है. So I think that's another reason why, especially the young folks,
absolutely,
just keep it inside. So
absolutely.
What do you
And
on that?
I will tell you one thing. This is something which I personally relate with as well, because I have experienced it. One of the reasons why I went into the field of mental health awareness advocacy was the fact that at the age of 15 or 16 even, when I was well aware of the psychological horizons of my mind and the various forms of issues, of psychological issues, which I might have suffered from past, and I wanted to talk about it, I wanted to discuss about it. The one thing which was absolutely evident to me was the fact that even the youngsters of my own age, my fellow classmates, my fellow friends, they were not even bothered to talk about it. They were not even interested to start a discussion about it, let alone help me in the journey or taking this topic ahead. So this was, in fact, one of the reasons why I went into this field and I ventured into, I would say, the avenue of mentoring the youngsters around the world about the importance of mental well-being. Because around my own self, I was able to see how much well aware my own classmates were. So I think that kind of drove me towards this field as well. So I absolutely agree with you, Poonam.
Definitely. I think that, and that's why I was saying, I think sensitivity is something that we really need to promote in society. Since we've been talking so much about the younger generation in youngsters, our next question is very relevant to that. We are noticing a growth pattern in the younger generation. Those are teens and young adults who are suffering from mental health concerns. In your opinion, what might be the reason for this?
All right. Okay, sure. So, Niharika, I have one question for you in response to this question. As a youngster, how much time on regular basis do you invest in introspecting your own self? How much time on regular basis, and I'm asking specifically in minutes, if I may say, do you invest in noting down on a piece of paper your own strengths, your own weaknesses, your own tensions, your own anxieties, the reasons behind them as well? If being honest, of course, you might be doing that, which is very good. And even if you do not do that, trust me, it is absolutely common for most of the youngsters out there in the world. I do not expect every single youngster out there in the world, or any people, any person at any age group whatsoever it might be, to physically sit down for 5 minutes and write down your strengths and weaknesses on a piece of paper on regular basis, or even on weekly basis, I would say. And believe it or not, even though this sounds something that most of the people do not do, this is also the reason why people are not mindful about what they are going through or what they might be stepping into in regards to their psychological well-being, or the psychology not being well. That is what I would like to call it as. The truth is that in today's world, because of the globalization, because of the connections, because of the exposure, and however you would like to put it as, the youngsters in particularly are more focused on the outward, I would say, portrayal of who they are, rather than the internal dimensions of their own. They are more focused on how they are appearing to be, rather than being even slightly focused about who they are as a person. And I'm not talking about the cliche terms of posting on Instagram and just being focused on the number of likes that you're receiving. Of course, that is one side of it, but even beyond that, because the world is so much globalized in today's time, because not just countries around the world, but also communities and individuals around the world are so much connected. They are so much interlinked with one another. They are also becoming more and more conscious and focused on the fact that whether they are looking up to the mark or not, instead of thinking about whether they are acting up to the mark or not, or whether they are thinking up to the mark or not. So because the focus is shifting towards the outwardly pretense, the inward dimensions or the inward psychology or the inward stresses or anxieties or depressions or even strengths and potentials and capabilities, they are being overlooked. So that is one of the major reasons, because the youngsters are not absolutely mindful about who they are and what they hold within their own selves. They're also compromising in some or the other way towards the field of mental health. That is also a very integral aspect of who they are and what they hold within their own selves. But that is only one side of the conversation, I would say. Because beyond this, another reason, according to me, because of which the youngsters in particular are suffering from so many psychological issues or mental health concerns is because of the, I would say, expanding amount of exposure, especially that the youngsters are receiving in the world of today. Now, this can be particularly or slightly because of the technological advancements in today's time as well, the digitalization, the readily availability of the internet platforms or the social connectivity platforms, or however it might be like. But then at the same time, whatever the reasons might be, whatever the root cause might be, eventually, because of the availabilities of all these platforms to connect with one another, to globalize with one another, these youngsters are also becoming very much exposed to the content, to the informations, to the let's say things in general, which might or might not be constructive. And there is no way to filter it out every single time when your child or when your son or when your brother is opening their mobile phone. There is no absolute way to filter out the right content and the wrong content, the constructive content or the destructive content, every single time a youngster picks up his or her phone or scrolls through the social media platforms. So eventually, because there is a readily availability of all these pieces of information which are not being filtered out, which are not being bifurcated, and the youngsters are absolutely exposed to it all, they are also consuming all of it without filtering out as well. So slowly and gradually, of course, it is not a one-day process, but when a young child at the age of 5 is getting a mobile phone, and then by the age of 15, he has all sorts of social media platforms readily built up for him. Of course, slowly and gradually, it would create an impact on his mind that this is more important than what he has within their own self, because he is seeing his fellow youngsters, he is seeing his fellow mates doing the same as well. So I think the absolute amount of exposure that the youngsters in today's world have, which in previous generations was not that much, I would say, is also one of the reasons why we are seeing a growing pattern of the mental illnesses or mental health concerns amongst the youngsters. But beyond that, the major focus, the primary cause, according to me, is the one which I mentioned earlier, which is about the fact that they are more focused on the outward pretense rather than the internal strengths or weaknesses that they have.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that we have to think about. And I certainly am going to personally be putting in more introspective hours in the day. And I hope everyone else in this meeting is going to do the same. Our next question goes like this. The past year has not ended up being very good for millions of youngsters, businesses, and dreams. People are facing challenges in pursuing their goals. Sensitive mental and physical health is becoming hindrances in achieving one's objectives. You, Yash Tiwari, have recently written the world's first novel on the novel coronavirus, Pandemic 2020, Rife of the Virus. On and during the pandemic, what advice would you give to the thriving and aspiring young minds who still feel stuck at the moment because of COVID 19 and might be suffering from mental health concerns due to the same?
All right. Okay, sure. So another very interesting question, I would say, which many of the youngsters out there would be able to benefit a lot from, and not just youngsters, but people from all walks of life and all age groups have suffered through the shackles of the mental health concerns, as we were talking about earlier, especially during the last 1 year because of the COVID-19 outbreak, because of the subsequent lockdowns, or whatever the issues might have been. The first thing as a motivational speaker, which I think I am, duty bound to be speaking about, is the fact that optimism might not be the cure. It might not be the vaccine to the coronavirus that we all are fighting against right now in the world, but it definitely can act as a booster, especially in those dark period of phases that you might be going through every now and then. And the COVID-19 outbreak or the lockdown and all that stuff, it is still not entirely gone. It has still not been entirely eradicated. It is still very much a part of our sheer reality at the moment. So we are still fighting against it, and there can be periods of darkness. There can be periods of feeling demotivated or feeling down in your life because of some or the other reason. But during those moments, focusing on the fact that yes, there is a brighter end to this all might not be the cure, might not be the solution, the absolute solution, but it definitely can act as a pushing force, a boosting force to get you through it, to navigate through it. And then secondly, another point which I want to raise over here is that usually, and I want to emphasize on the word usually, because this is not the case with all of the individuals or all of the situations, but usually people feel depressed, people feel distressed, people feel tense or anxious when they feel like they are going through something and the rest of the world is moving ahead. They are suffering from something and the rest of the people, the community around them, the society around them, their friends and family members, they are absolutely fine. They are absolutely healthy. They are surviving through it all. They are navigating through it all and absolutely fine with everything that is going on around them. That wasn't the case with COVID-19 or even the lockdowns that we're talking about. Of course, if you are imprisoned within the four walls of your houses for 7 to 8 months at stretch, that is quite obvious to have a toll on your psychological well-being or your mental health, as we're talking about. I agree with that. That is quite justified. Your mind, I should say, gets to be compromised a little bit or gets to feel a little bit tensed by being stuck within the four walls of your houses for months upon months in stretch. That is quite justified. That is quite natural. But what you should not be feeling is depressed about the fact that you are being quarantined or you are within the lockdown or you have gone through a lot. Because the truth is that you are not the only person who had to navigate through a lot during this phase of COVID-19. Of course, many people had to suffer through a lot. Many people had to suffer comparably less. But at the end of the day, the coronavirus outbreak was, I would say, it was something that was unanimously impacting on each and every single person. It wasn't specific to only a certain country or a certain city or a certain sect of people. It was something that every single person had to navigate through. The lockdowns were something that every single person had to suffer from, had to face. So eventually it is, in some twisted way, I should say, it is also something that united us all on the single plane, which I know it sounds quite weird to be thinking about it when we talk of something as negative or destructive as the coronavirus outbreak, but that is the harsh reality. Even in the world where things as harsh or as destructive as COVID-19 outbreak exist, they can also at the same time act as uniting forces. So eventually what I want to, want all of you to focus over here is on the fact that the COVID-19 outbreak or all that you had to suffer through it was not something that only you went through. Every single person around you also had to go through it all. So it is not something that only and only you should be depressed about or feel distressed about. And of course, things are getting better. Situations are changing. The cures, the vaccinations, the precautions are developing as well. So how we are moving towards the normality is, I would say, a different conversations to be taken. But we are moving towards the normality. That is the another reality which I want to present as well, which I want all of you to be hopeful about as well. So another way to look at this normality that we are slowly and gradually walking towards is this statement which I authored in my second novel, I don't know, in my first novel as well. And this is quite famous too, if you might have heard of it, that there is always a bright end to every dark tunnel, no matter how long it might be. So just focus on walking further. Just focus on moving forward and keeping your eye concentrated on that one speck of light at the end of the dark tunnel, which you might be caught up in right now. Because trust me, there always is that one speck of light at the end of this dark tunnel, no matter how long it might be. So those would be the two signs which I would like to present on this point.
Definitely. I think light at the end of a tunnel is one of those very hopeful statements that keeps us very motivated during this
Absolutely.
very difficult time. Thank you, Yash. Shreya will be taking you through the rest of the questions.
All right, sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niharika. That was wonderful. And thank you so much, Yash, for sharing your thoughts. I do believe that when we talk about the pandemic, especially, it definitely did contribute to increased feelings of isolation, anxiety, and vulnerability. But at the same time, it definitely, and I'd agree with you there, it was a uniting force. And I mean, what are your thoughts on how people actually have started normalizing mental health issues? I think, especially during the last 1.5 years, ever since the lockdown was announced, there were a lot of people coming forward to talk about mental health. They were talking about mental health, they were talking about depression, everything, probably as victims or also as people who support the cause. So what is your take on that? What do you have to say?
Well, Shreya, I think the primary reason behind this I would say sudden growth in the discussions that are happening on the topic of mental health and the psychological well-being roots down to the fact that people finally had time to do it. Earlier, they were caught up in this fast-paced life where they were caught up in their, let's say, 9 to 5 jobs or 9 to 5 colleges or 9 to 5 schools. And that was pretty much it. And I'm not talking about every single person. I want to emphasize on this point again and again in the session that I'm talking only and only about majority of the people. Many of you might have been very constructive and focused on this topic earlier as well. But for most of the people around the world, they genuinely did not have that time to, just heave a sigh of relief or sit down for a moment and think about their psychology or mental health and depression and whatnot, even when they were suffering through it. Like, as a matter of fact, you might be going through the harshest of phases of depression and still be quite active in your real life. And that is what was happening earlier in the world. I would say, before 2020 or even in the earlier part of 2019. That was the absolute reality, which you need to consider right now about why the discussions have finally started to happen around the topic of mental health. But because in the past 1 year, even if all of us were very busy in our work, which were, made work from home or technology driven or whatever the platforms might have been, we still were within the four walls of our houses only. We still had more time to think about who we are, what we do, what we stand for, what we think about, and all that stuff. So, because we had that moment to just breathe for a second, I think that was the reason why we also started to discuss about these topics as well that we earlier did not have much time for.
Well, I agree. But, unfortunately, even today, having that period, I mean, that period has passed. We're in a better stage right now. But even then, stigma is such a major barrier while sensitizing mental health. And I think that is something that all of us as a community needs to overcome. So, what are the most absurd mental health myths that you've come across, and any that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, of course, of course. So there are quite a few, I must say. Some that I have read about, some that I have been directly communicated about through the youngsters whom I interacted with about the issues that they are going through. But this one common absurd belief which I experience on every single day whenever I'm communicating with any person whatsoever, even the ones who might be going through the issues themselves, is the fact that many people believe that if a person is able to perform the regular day-to-day activities normally, if a person is able to go to school regularly, go to college regularly, perform well, and even earn well in their jobs, in their 9 to 5 jobs, or just be the kind of person that they were earlier, then it must mean that they are not going through anything whatsoever. And if they are saying that they are going through something, if they are saying that, I am depressed or I am tense nights, I am anxious, I am not feeling well, and they're still performing very well in their work sphere, in their academic sphere, then it simply means that either they are making it up or they are not absolutely aware about what depression genuinely means. This is perhaps the most absurd, I would say, myth about the mental health, about the psychological well-being that I've ever witnessed. And this is also something which persists. This is not changing for some or the other reason. I don't know why. Even though we are discussing so much about the psychological well-being, I can tell you one thing very clearly, that performing well, or even performing in general, I cannot talk about performing well, but performing in general, completing your day-to-day tasks figuring out your to-do list and completing all the list of activities that you have maintained in it, and suffering from mental health concerns like depression or anxiety or tension or stress, these are absolutely different things. I was going through the worst phase of, I would say, introversion and anxieties at the moment when I was winning first prizes in debate competitions and extemporaries and group discussions in my school time. I can assure you that of course, there is a correlation between your mind working well and you acting well, but there is absolutely no correlation between your mind working well and you working at all. You can perform your day-to-day activities, you can be quite active in your life and still be going through a lot in your life. So this is another myth which I want all of the audience members who are listening to us right now to burst, to break, and not acknowledge at all. This is something that you need to be very well aware of, that being psychologically healthy does not equate to the fact that you are working well in your work sphere or your academic sphere or whatever it might be. So I hope that this point is crystal clear to all the audience members right now.
Well, definitely. And I think, Yash, it's really mutually exclusive. You may be a great performer or an average performer. Well, that is different. But I think at the end of the day, understanding what the mind goes through, I think that is really important. And I think also sensitizing mental health at workplaces is so crucial at times like these. And I think that is one area that we need to build on. And I definitely concur with your thoughts on that. Trust you me, I do. And well, on that note, I move on to the next question. So today, the youth, fortunately, has started acknowledging mental health suffering. But at the same time, there are so many people around the globe who are afraid to seek help. Now, what would your advice to them be? What would your 2 cents be on that?
All right, sure. I think this is another very important topic of quite an interest for most of the youngsters out there in particular, especially the ones who are still dependent on their guardians and their parents and, somebody elder to them to seek mental health support groups, or let's say therapists or psychologists or whatever the means of support or relief might be. And of course, when you are dependent on somebody, you become a little bit conscious about how to even communicate about the same to that person, or thinking whether your parents would even understand why you need to seek mental health support or not, or even being a little bit afraid about it. The first thing that you need to remember is that you should not convert that sense of fear about whether your parents would understand your psychological concerns or not into a sense of stigma for your psychological well-being, because that is, I would say, that is where it all goes haywire. That is where it all derails, because the moment you decide that people around you will most probably not understand, so I shouldn't be even talking about it anyway, that is the moment when you crush your mental health even much worse than how it is right now. So firstly, remember the fact that yes, whether or not the people around you understand it or not, it matters. Your health matters, your physical health matters, and equally your psychological health matters too. Now, when we talk about how to share it with the parents, how to compel them in some or the other way to take you to the support groups or the institutions where the help can be sought, where the help can be taken care of, first of all, understand this one fact, or try to figure out the fact that whether your guardians or your parents are somebody who are well aware of the social trends right now or not. Are they somebody who are very proactive about the mental health discussions and the psychological illnesses or issues or not? Even if they are not, trust me, it is not wrong, because they belong to a generation where frequent therapies or psychologists or psychiatrists, they were not that common. That is quite obvious. There are things which will be developed in 10 years from now on, which maybe to you might feel quite alien. So if they are not well open to it, if they are not well aware of it, that is also absolutely fine. But you need to understand whether they are aware of it or not, because that is where the discussion genuinely starts. Understanding the sense of awareness or the degree of awareness about it. Now, once you have figured that out, and you feel that your parents or your guardians might not be well aware of the mental health mental health support systems or mental health support institutions, try to lay the groundwork for it. Do not just throw the information on them like a balloon. Try to discuss slowly and gradually about it. Try to ease in the conversation about it. Try to make them understand what the topic of mental health actually is. Like in the initial part of the session today, I did not just start with the complex statements about the mental health, right? I started to define it first of all. I started to briefly talk about what it genuinely means, what are the various aspects of it, and then we went on to the more complex questions. Just like that, when you are having a conversation with your guardians, with your parents as well, try to ease in the conversation. Try to lay a groundwork about it, even a couple of days before you hit the main nail about you seeking that therapist or you seeking that mental health institution or whatever the ideology of yours or the objective of yours might be. But try to be very much, I would say, comfortable about it and make them comfortable about it as well when you are easing in the conversation. Now, after you have done that and you are finally in the stage where you are openly talking about it, that is what you need to remember. You are not just talking about it, you are being absolutely open about it as well. You are communicating all the diverse ways in which you might have suffered through the psychological concerns, all the ways in which it has impacted your life, not just asking you to take to the doctor, but trying to explain why you need that. What all have you gone through in a little bit of detail. Try to be as much expressive as you possibly can be. And then eventually try to be a little bit objective as well. Try to make them understand what are the benefits which you already know of, you will be able to feel, you will be able to experience once you seek this certain kind of help, whatever the form of help might be for you. But whatever you are seeking, try to make them understand what are the foreseeable benefits of it that you already are aware of. And then eventually, the final note that you need to keep in your mind is the fact that you are not communicating only and only in your language. At least try to make an effort to communicate in a language that your parents, that your guardians would actually understand. Now, this is something which I cannot be very precise about because every single person has a different way of communicating. Every single parent out there or guardian out there would understand things differently. So this is something which only you, after years and years of your experience, would be able to make out. But try to make it a point that you are not trying to force the information on them. You are trying to communicate about them. You are trying to have a dialogue with them. Try to remind them throughout the conversation as well that you are just seeking their opinions as well. You are seeking their help as well alongside the other sort of help, the medical help that you are seeking through the mental health support systems. So these would be, some basic suggestions which I would like to give to the youngsters who are seeking the medical support, but they want their parents to be on board as well, or they want their guardians to be on board as well.
But Yash, that brings me to another question. And I do agree that we need to start changing the narrative around mental health and that we need to really create a very compassionate fabric in society so that those who actually are in need of help are also not afraid to seek it when the time arrives. But having said that, you spoke about how individuals must approach their parents to talk about the issues they're facing and to start awareing them about mental health. But don't you think that a person who is in the midst of a storm, who is battling so many issues, probably is not capacitated well enough to actually take that step forward to talk to their parents? So what would your advice be to such students? Because there's so many students who probably just are not in the stage to talk openly about things. They're so crushed from within and engulfed in the darkness that they just will not be able to open their mouths at all. So how do you think they can be helped?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Shreya. But as we were talking about it earlier, this goes both the ways. We are not just talking about the sufferers. We are not just talking about the community around us. We are talking about a two-way discussion where when you are able to communicate about it, that is well and good. The help should be provided to you. And when you are not in the capacity to do that, people around you should also be making an effort about it. Like, for example, we are having this discussion right now. We are having this session right now about the topic of mental health because we do not just want to communicate about it just between us two, right? We want the audience members out there, we want the youngsters who are listening to us right now out there as well to feel that, yes, their psychological issues are being acknowledged. They are being acknowledged. If they're going through a phase where they do not know how to even go through it, how to even survive through it, then there are people who are willing to talk about it. There are people who are willing to discuss about it. So absolutely, as I mentioned, I totally agree with you that there are times when a youngster or any individual in general, I do not want to pinpoint this point on the youngsters in particular, but any individual who might be going through such a horrendous phase of psychological issues where you cannot figure things out on your own, of course, it is a duty of people around you to take the initiative as well, to take the step as well. I think the only reason why it becomes so difficult many a times for the people around you to take that step is, as I said earlier, because of the fact that the psychological issues are not that easily perceivable. If there is a sudden change in your behavior patterns, if there is an absolute sudden change in your actions and your reactions and your responses and your way of speaking and your way of acting as well, of course, that will, click in the mind of the people who are communicating with you, who are interacting with you. But many a times when that is not there, because I can assure you, only a very small percentage of people genuinely manifest that change in behavior patterns. Most of them are just trying to survive through it. They are just trying to go through it feeling like that, good as I am, I should be as nice as I am, because they should not be aware of the fact that I am going through a lot of tension. So it has to be an open conversation from your end as well, that yes, I'm going through something, I want to acknowledge it, and I need your help. And it also should be an open conversation from the side of the people who you are addressing, whom you are communicating with, that yes, even if we do not understand it entirely, even if we do not get all of it, because we personally have not gone through it, we still want to be there for you. We still want to support you. Now tell me, how can I support you? Now tell me, what can I do for you? What is it that you need my help for? This is something which, in fact, I would like to suggest to the parents or the elders who are listening to us right now as well. Like you were asking that, what is the solution for it? The solution, or the other side of the picture, is all about the fact that even when you feel that you are not well aware of all the medical terminologies of the psychological well-being, when you're not aware of all the diverse avenues of the mental health of a person, you still do say that, yes, I am there for you. I want to understand more about it. Can you please explain it a little bit more? What are the ways in which I can help about it? What are the things which I can search on the internet? How do you want me to support you? So I think that open acknowledgement, and along with that, that open support for whosoever might be reaching out to you, is absolutely essential for an effective two-way conversation about the topic of mental health.
Right, absolutely. I think denial and delusion are those two things that we must stay wary of, because if we start lying to ourselves, I think that's when we start losing the battle. And I think as soon as we start talking about it, or even before that, as soon as we start accepting what we're going through, our challenges, issues, I think that is half the battle won right there.
Exactly.
So, absolutely. And I agree with that thought of yours too. And I think as a society, as a community, the least we can do is look the other person in the eye, hold their hand and tell them that, you know what, we're here with you and you're responsible for your story and this is not how it'll end. So don't worry, we got this. And
exactly.
I think, absolutely, I think that is so important, that reassurance.
And that is what this session was all about, I must say. That is what this conversation was all about as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yash. And also, I have two more questions to ask. Now, since we're talking about, I'm sorry for that commotion in the background.
No issue. All right.
Thank you. So now we're talking about youngsters. And when we talk about youngsters, we actually relate to the times we're living in right now that is so tech dependent, driven by the internet. So how do you think that social media applications, technology, and internet are actually playing a role in scarring the mental health of the people? What is your take on that?
All right. So first of all, being very brief about this answer, because I think we are running a little bit out of time right now. First of all, we do need to remember that when we are so much dependent on these technological platforms which are driving the globalized world of today, of course, it is exposing us to so much more than what is, what can be considered constructive or good or positive for your mind. We are exposed to all sorts of informations. We are exposed to all sorts of content. And at the same time, we are also consuming it all without bifurcating it, without filtering it out, without categorizing it in good or bad, in constructive or destructive, especially the youngsters who are not so much well aware of what is good or bad in the world in the first place. So because of that expansive exposure, in regards to the technological platforms that we're dependent on, that we're a part of, that does take a toll on our psychological well-being as well. But then secondly, another side of this would be the fact, and I know this is going to be a little bit complex to think about, but according to me, and this is something which I have experienced in my own life as well, we have become so much dependent on these technological platforms for even the most basic activities of our life that our mental activity is reducing slowly and gradually. Our mind activity is reducing slowly and gradually. You want to remember something? You need not to. You can simply prepare a note on your Samsung mobile app. You want to navigate through a certain road? You need not to even think about it or figure the way out. You can simply open your Google GPS navigation system, and that would be pretty much it. That would help you out. You want to, measure the certain sum that you have come up with. You need not to even think about it. Just open your mobile calculator and you will be done with it within a second or so. At the same time, if I present the same calculation to you to do mentally, it will become a distress in the moment, at least in the moment, even if you can in a minute or so figure it out eventually. But that is one point which I want to, raise over here. That because we are becoming so much dependent on these technological platforms for the most basic activities of our life, the mind activity, the mental activity is slowly and gradually reducing. What does that mean for our mental health? It means that because the usage of our mind is reducing, so whenever we are presenting with even the slightest of distressing situation, we eventually become extremely tensed about it. We eventually become extremely horrified by it, or even feel overwhelmed about it. Like, for example, if you do not exercise at all, your body is like, it is rusting in some way or the other, and you are asked to pick up a 5 kg dumbbell. Now, I exercise every day, so a 5 kg dumbbell would not be an issue for me whatsoever. But if I am putting up the weight after 2 years of not exercising at all, of course, it will be an issue for me. It will not be something that I will be able to do in the first go. So that is one thing that you need to remember, that you have to keep your mind active as well and not just depend on the technological platforms for absolutely everything, because eventually it is going to impact your mental activity, and that effect of mental activity is also going to impact your mental well-being. So I hope that this point is clear to all the listeners right now.
Absolutely. I think most of our lives are on spreadsheets today. We really need to get rid of that at the end of the day. Yes, because I think the first question in every class these days is, oh, can we use a calculator? Oh, can we use the spreadsheet? We're so dependent on AI and automation that I think the activity of our mind has really been compromised with. And that is something that we must consciously be aware of and find a way to solve. So that truly is. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on that point as well, Yash. Brings me to the last question, which is that words like depression, stress, anxiety, they've taken center stage in today's fast-paced world. So what are the little things that as individuals, you and I can do on a very regular basis to keep check of the same and make sure that we have healthy and happy minds?
Yeah, absolutely. There are certain things which are not going to take much of your time on regular basis, which definitely can contribute a great deal to your psychological well-being, to your mental health. The first of it is to be mindful about who you are, being mindful about your strengths, being mindful about your weaknesses, being mindful about the kind of opportunities that you see, the kind of threats that you feel are around you, the SWOT analysis, as we like to call it, your latent potentials, latent capacities, your latent obstructions within your own self that you are well aware of, or even the ones which you are not aware of, but you at least make an effort to think about it on regular basis. But basically, trying to invest at least 5 minutes on the throughout the 24 hours of the single day to at least think about who you are as a person. Because most of the times we feel overwhelmed by situations, like I was talking earlier, because we feel that we do not have a strength for it. We do not have a solution for it. We are way too weak to even solve this mathematical problem because we have always solved it with the calculator of our mobile phone. So the reason why that happens is because you never try to test your waters. You never try to test your own latent potentials and see how far you can possibly go. So try to be a little bit mindful about who you are as a person and all the latent forces within your own self. And then secondly, another thing that you need to be mindful about is what you are doing. how are you being in the world, your social avenues and your social dimensions, as we're talking about in the initial part of our session. Your maladaptive practices, your destructive coping mechanisms, the way in which you might be doing something simply to pass the time, but you know it is not going to constructively provide to your life in any way, or it can even go on to destruct your life in some ways, whatsoever it might be. But you need to at least be a little bit mindful about how you are acting in the world, what kind of role you are playing, and are you even optimistically acting about improving your life, or are you just being reluctant about how things are going right now? So this is another avenue that you need to be quite focused on. It is not just about thinking of who you are, or not just about thinking of what you are doing. It is a combination of both. And I would say, in a nutshell, it is simply and simply about being mindful about all that you have the potential for and all that you can do possibly in the world, and investing time in that more than the negative side of all that you might be coming up with or that might be coming up in your mind. So that is what I would like to say on this question.
Right, absolutely. And I think we should really stop chasing short-term gratifications that will never serve any of us well. And I think that is the problem with most of us today. And I would actually take all of us into the same group and cohort to actually, to represent this notion, because I think most of us in today's time we're just chasing happiness that probably lasts 2 days, 1 day, and that is it. We really do not look at the bigger picture. We do not address ourselves. And I think that is where I think probably the SWOT analysis would come handy. We can all go back, sit for 5 to 10 minutes every day, every night, or in the morning, whenever feasible, and just introspect what we're about, who we are. And I think we really miss out on that. And it is so pertinent that we do it. So really, thank you so much, Yash. This was a great, great session. And well, I'd just like to ask Poonam ma'am if we have time to take up some questions. Can we go ahead, ma'am?
Yes, it depends on Yash. If he has another 5 minutes to spend with us, please go ahead.
Absolutely. We can surely do that.
Okay.
Great, that was really perceptive. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Yash. What I'll do now is I'll hand it over to Niharika. Niharika, if you're here, please do share questions if we have any in the chat, and we can have one.
We just got one question, I think. So Saket is asking you, Yash. His question is: keeping our mind occupied makes us feel less anxious about ourselves. But like everyone says, memories haunt you. As soon as the mind is set free, it travels. How to be optimistic in such conditions?
Well, Saket, it was Saket, right?
Yes. Saket.
Saket, my friend, the first thing that you need to remember is that you shouldn't be, trying to overburden your mind or overfill your mind with work or with other thoughts just to stay away from the anxieties or the tensions or the depressions that you're suffering from. This is where you need to begin with. Not the other way around. You have to be more focused on the fact that you're not simply distracting your mind from the tensions or into the work just to become a workaholic simply for the sake of it. Because I know many people do that. Even I did that for a very long period of time. And according to me, now it has turned out to be a negative coping mechanism or simply a maladaptive practice. Just to, spend as much of time in working, even if it is constructive or destructive for your life, but doing something or the other simply to keep your mind away from all the tensions or distress or anxieties or even the deadlines that you might be, you might be fighting against. Keep this point in your mind that the more you try to run away from it, the deeper it will become eventually. Like, for example, I will give you a very understandable example about it. If you take a glass jar and you start filling it up with brownies. Brownies are very good. I think that would be quite understandable to think about, right? So you take a glass jar, you start filling it up with brownies, and you keep on filling it up, and you feel very happy that, you are just filling it up and you are keeping it on a side, you are not eating it, and it is not going to haunt you whatsoever. After a time, when you have filled like a gazillion brownies in a single small glass masonry jar, the jar will burst, the brownies will get destroyed, and everything will go haywire. That is what happens with your mind as well. You keep on filling up the mind with tension and tension and tension, not your mind, I would say, but a small corner of it. You just start pulling everything under the rug. You just keep doing that. You do not think about it. You try to put it on a side. You think that, if I keep my mind focused on the other things, this garbage, which is getting accumulated in my mind, it will eventually evaporate on its own. I can assure you that this tension or anxiety, it is not biodegradable. It stays there. It is going to stay there until and unless you physically take the trash out of your mind and throw it somewhere. So this is what you need to remember, that being a workaholic is a different thing. I am a workaholic, but I'm not a workaholic as a coping mechanism. I do not consider my work as a coping mechanism. I try to do it because I genuinely feel passionate about it. Unlike one phase in my life when I used to be as much invested into my work just to get through a single day, just to navigate through a single day and not even think about or even acknowledge the tensions or anxieties or stress that I was thinking about. And beyond just acknowledging that, yes, there is a piece in your mind which is filled up with a lot of tension or anxiety or whatever it might be, try to think of the root cause behind it all as well. Because most of the times, I can assure you, there is a root cause for it. There is a reason why it is happening. Like, for example, for my own self, I came to know after a very, I would say, a very long period of time when I was 16 years old or 15 years old, that all the depression and all the anxiety that I was feeling was in fact stemming from the sense of introversion, which I had developed within my own self because of a period of time in my life when I was not able to attend my school, when I was not able to even go out of my house. So there was a root cause of it, right? But I was able to identify it only when I tried to do that, only when I made an effort for it. So first of all, acknowledge that yes, there is a part in your mind where you are simply filling up the trash of tension and anxiety that you do need to acknowledge, that you do need to work upon. And then secondly, trying to find the root cause of where all of that trash is generating from as well. That is what I would like to say on this question.
Thank you, Yashi. I definitely agree with you. I think dealing with the problem is so much better than letting it boil inside and concocting into something much more. We've got a couple more questions. Karan Panwar wants to know, his question is, Sir, is it important to react or find solution immediately when we think someone is suffering or if he himself is suffering? Or should we wait for some time to understand things and let us recover naturally?
If you ask me as a mental health awareness advocate, of course, I would say that you should seek this treatment, you should seek the help, you should seek a solution for it as soon as possible. And that is what I was talking about in the previous question as well, right? That if you just try to keep it in your mind and see if it biodegradably evaporates in the air, then it will not. That is the truth. It definitely will not. It will stay there. It is only that you could have solved it today, but you are taking another year to test whether it will evaporate or not. And you know the answer that it definitely, most certainly will not. It might take another phase. It might take another shape. It might take another color or another structure, but it will come back to you. And who knows, it might not even come back to you. It might stay with you on every step of the way. So do not try to think about delaying the process of seeking help or seeking a solution or even finding the solution on your own just to see whether it will work out on its own, just to see whether it will evaporate on its own or whether the brownies will, decompose on their own or not. I can assure you they do not. You will have to eat it up eventually.
Well, Yash, in fact, a lot of people are so scared of shrinks, right? So they think about a shrink and they want to run away that very instant. So what do you want to tell the families of persons who are facing this problem or individuals who are going through such a dark phase? How should they probably take the first step to visit a shrink or a psychologist and actually open up?
See, I will tell you one thing. The main reason why so many youngsters or even their families are so much, I would say, stressed about seeking such sort of mental health or medical help in particular is because of the term medical that is associated with these professions or these jobs. They feel like that just because we are talking about medical health in specific or medical support in specific, of course, it might include a lot of medications and procedures and therapies and whatnot. I can tell you that when we are talking about a psychologist, it is going to be a conversation even more comfortable than the one that we are having right now. I can assure you about that. It is going to be a conversation that you generally have with your friends, that you generally have with your parents, that your parents have with you, and the other way around. And in general, how you communicate with people, how you interact with people, how you have those discussions in the most generic format, I would say, that is what happens in these I would say sessions as well. Of course, the meaning of it all is going to be much better. The meaning of it all, the benefits of it all are going to be much, much greater. That is why we try to seek them, right? That is why the solution does not depend on only those conversations which you're having with your friends. We do encourage you to seek the medical health, the psychologist, the therapist eventually. But even though their conversations are going to be much more effective than any other conversation that you can have with your friends, they still are going to be mere conversations only. They're only going to be about, let's say, easing into the discussion that you're having, trying to, let's say, release all of it out of your brain. Like I was talking about earlier, having that piece of trash stuck up in your mind and not knowing what to do with it. You have to throw it out, but you do not know how to throw it. You just, when you are having that conversation, you just ease it out. You just let it flow out of your body. And trust me, it does. You are not going to have to physically do something for it. When you are having that effective conversation with a professional psychologist, it will automatically get released out. And that person will not just help you in releasing it all out, they will also guide you about how to keep it that way, how to keep the sanity or the clarity or the optimism maintained up here, even after the 1 hour session that you are having. So trust me on this, that you shouldn't be overwhelmed about the word medical that is attached with a psychologist or a therapist or whatnot. You should just consider them as a person whom you are going to have a professionally effective conversation with. That is what it is all about.
So one last question, Shreya or Niharika, whoever wants to take
Yes,
it up.
ma'am. I think it's a nice question to even end on. Saurav Thakur wants to know, as you said, that a lot of people aren't aware of this topic and we need to spread awareness. So do you think the introduction of this subject or aspects of this subject, which can help in solving this issue, should be included in our academic curriculums? So curriculums in school or in colleges?
Niharika, trust me, I have been advocating about it in so many schools and so many colleges that I've been visiting in the past 2 to 3 years, I would say, since the release of my first novel in 2018. And I don't have a count about it. And this was, in fact, one agenda which I had in my mind as well, that I wanted to convey at the end of our session today too. That no matter whether we are talking about the secondary education, we are talking about the primary education, we are talking about the higher education, whatever phase of academic institution you are in, it should be a part of the discussions that you're having. And even if it cannot be translated into an absolute subject for your curriculum, even the students on their own can continue with the consistent discussions about the psychological well-being, about the mental health. Like, for example, if we are having this conversation right now, if we are having this discussion right now, then I hope that this is only going to be the first of many other sessions, many other discussions that the students over here in this university are going to have about the mental health. You can have these live sessions, you can have WhatsApp group chains, you can have email chains, you can have even one-on-one discussions, you can have your adda conversations at tea stalls or however you would like to prefer it, and whatever mode of communication you are comfortable with. But try to share the clarity that you have in your own mind about the psychological well-being, about the mental health with your fellow mates as well. This is not something that you need to depend on others for. The dissipation of knowledge about mental health. Like, for example, if 100 something students were watching us live right now, then I do expect that they are going to share the information that they found was informative, was interesting, was helpful in some way or the other with their friends as well, with their family members as well. Because if I'm talking about, this solution that parents need to remember, and parents are not even watching me right now, then it wouldn't be of any use, right? But the students, the youngsters who are listening to me right now, they have a duty of conveying the pointers to their parents, to the elders whom they are connected with. So all in all, it depends on the fact that whether you are taking the conversation ahead or not. I mean, to answer the first question that you asked, I think I kind of sidetracked from it. Of course, it does need to be a part of our academic curriculum, our academic structure, our academic syllabus. But beyond that, it also needs to be a part of our regular activities, the regular discussions and interactions that we are having. And more than that, whether or not you are aware of all the dimensions of psychological well-being or not, you should at least encourage the discussion about it. You should at least encourage the curiosity in your own mind to learn more about it, to study more about it, to research more about it, because trust me, at every step of the way, in every step of your life, it will be an essential element of who you are and what you do. So those will be the 2 cents which I would like to share on the question that I was asked, which I know I kind of sidetracked from.
No, I think that was absolutely brilliant, and I think you've covered everything. And in fact, I saw Karan wrote in the chat box that he will be showing this recording to his parents, and I hope we all can do that with ours as well, and show it
Thank
to
you so much, Karan.
Show it to everybody. I think even someone had asked a question about how to share mental health issues with rural people, so maybe we can show them these recordings, have these
Exactly.
in those demographics as well. Thank you so much, Yash. And Poonam ma'am, would you like to come on and maybe give a little small word of thanks before we end today?
Well, it's been one of the most engrossing talks that we've had. I think one can, you guys would be able to relate to Yash so well because he's just exactly your age group and somebody talking. I mean, we guys go on and on about it, but someone, of your own peer group talking so sensibly about it and having so much to share. It was really amazing. So thank you, Yash. And honestly, I have been a strong advocate of, recognizing that there is a problem that occurs in our society and we shy away from it. In fact, even when students go to a counselor in the university, there's an air of hush-hush about it. They don't want anybody else to see कि हम counselor के पास जा रहे हैं तो हमारा पागल हो गए हैं क्या दिमाग खराब हो गया है that stigma is still around it, and that's what we need to sort of cut down on. And in fact, my own son-in-law, Shriya, is very familiar with him. Went through some major physical issues. He was having some problem. See, he actually, it started affecting him mentally. And he did take help, and he was very open about it. So I think that's how we all need to be. As Yash says that mental illness or mental health is an issue, just as physical health is, right? And you need to recognize it probably even more strongly than you need to recognize your physical health, because the symptoms are not visible out there. But please remember that if you're going through anything, you are not alone. There are people to help you. There are people like us, Yash, your friends, your parents, anyone that you feel comfortable with. And stars and celebrities, I mean, Deepika Padukone makes no bones about the fact that she went through. Yash just spoke about it. And then somebody, I think, from the Wimbledon pulled out very recently because she said her mental health was getting affected. So recognize it, raise it, and, help yourself and help others. That's what I would say. So once again, Yash, amazing. Please do stay connected with us. We'd like to reach out to you for more discussions like this. And thank you so much. Thank you, Shriya. Thank you, Niharika. Thank you, students. And once again, Yash, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It was an honor. I had a great time and looking forward to addressing the students once again very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I hope sessions like these reduce stigma. And definitely, I hope these are what initiate more discussions the way Yash said it. Thank you for joining in, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our Guru Talk. I'm sure it was a very, very important and significant one and useful one for all of you.